Good morning, everybody. This is Dan, and this is the Napkin Academy. As I've been mentioning to folks that are already on, we're going to be doing things just a little bit differently today. Today, we're going to be having complete open mic, and that means that everybody has a chance to participate and join in whenever they'd like. Let's go ahead and do a review and conclusion of our section on vivid grammar. The simple idea that we've been talking about for these last many lessons is that we can use words and pictures to be more clear in our own mind if we're thinking about something, and we can use them to be much more clear if we're sharing that idea then with other people as well. The term that we've applied for this is what we call vivid thinking, of course. Vivid meaning the combination of the visual and the verbal, making them interdependent so that we're working together with both the words and the pictures. Super quick review. We have a tendency to share ideas in a formal environment in one of two ways. We tend to write things out in outline form, which we then use to write a document, or we create things in a kind of a visual form where we create mind maps or we create diagrams that pull our ideas together. Now, what we want to do is be able to combine both of them. So what we've talked about is the fact that when we're doing our written documentation, we're in our fox mode, our fox mind, a very clever mind, very linear, very analytic. This is our verbal mind. When we're letting our mind just sort of ramble around and look at pictures and try to imagine what's the connection between things, now we're in hummingbird mode, which is much more spatial, more spontaneous, more synthetic, but also very hard to grab onto. And this is our visual mind. Of course, our verbal mind, our fox mind, over the last centuries has been given lots and lots of structure on how to formulate the ideas that come out of that part of our mind in the form of verbal grammar, where we know that we break things down into subjects and predicates, and then we have various types of speech, whether those are nouns or adverbs or prepositions or what have you. The point being, we've got a lot of structure for how do we create an idea in a linear verbal form. Trouble is, of course, there's almost no structure that's ever been applied to our more flighty side. And yet this side is so critically important to us and where so many of our good ideas lie. So what we've tried to do with vivid grammar is provide some structure for this side as well. We began by actually drawing out something that we called the vivid grammar graph, which was the underlying structure that allowed us to take 6 simple types of pictures and actually turn them into metaphorical parts of visual speech. We're going to be able to draw little nouns. We can draw our adjectives. We can draw our prepositions, etc. So we can take written communication and literally take it through this set of tools and turn it in to visual communication. That's the idea of vivid grammar, of course. And the big takeaway was what we called the final vivid grammar graph, which we've reviewed in the last 6 sessions. So let's start from the top of that list. Okay, when I want to try to draw a noun, when I want to draw a thing, I know what to draw. Here's a person. Here's a place. Here's a thing. What have you. So everybody seemed to understand those. Most people seem to have a good understanding of when we draw a map. The map, of course, is the picture we draw when we want to describe where things are. And the maps could be a sort of a north-south, west-east map where we plot in a geography. A map could be what we call a 2x2 or a quad chart where we say this is good and this is bad, mapped to, I don't know, expensive or inexpensive, and we can map things in to these various quadrants. That's what our maps do. Nobody really struggled with timelines. Timelines, of course, the pictures that we draw when we want to show the sequence of events. And where we had the trouble, though, was on charts, flow charts, and multivariable plots. So let's review these really quick. A chart is the picture that we draw when we want to show number, when we want to quantify things. Not what they look like, but how many are there? I draw my chart. My chart, by definition, is the kind of a picture that maps one or two measurable things together. So that could be time, which I could measure in seconds, versus money, which I could measure in dollars or pounds or whatever the currency is. And I could say over time, prices are going up, going down, etc. So that's one type of chart. Another type of chart might be my bar chart, where I simply have a number of different items and I want to compare some measurable aspect of them to each other. So let's segment these out, make sure we're keeping them specific. Let's talk though about what seems to be the greatest source of confusion for many people, which are the flowcharts and the multivariable plot, with a real focus on this. The flowchart is the map of sequence, of causal effect, cause and effect. So if I have an item here and a person here, and that person interacts with that item in a particular way, maybe they cut it in half. I see that now I've got one person, but I've got two items. Well, let's say now that those two items go in different directions and interact with different people. Then of course some other things are going to happen. The purpose of the flowchart is to try to map out the sequence of things that have taken place. Now, I think what's important, I want to erase everything that's on here for a moment. To anybody who asked, what is a multivariable plot? How do I use a Y picture? Or how many pictures are really necessary? Here's what my response is. We've got an idea or a problem. And let's say we're working on this thing by ourselves. We're looking at it and we're not happy because we don't understand it. Here's what I suggest we do. We start with the simplest picture that there is to draw. We start by drawing the portrait, and we are very clear what we're doing with that. We are only asking who and what is involved in this problem. We're not asking for any relationships, any numbers, anything else. We're just trying to get the nouns of the picture down on paper. You can think about this as someone who's playing a game of chess. All the little pieces are lined up before the game begins. That's kind of similar to what we're trying to do. Or if you imagine, we could even make let's say this is not a chessboard now, but let's say that this is a football pitch. What's the first thing that happens before the game starts? We meet the players. They come out on the field and we meet them. We identify who are the players. Oh, we've got some players, and then in the middle of them we've got a ball. Okay, these are the people, these are the characters that are about to interact. That's the first picture we draw. Then we start to number them. Well, how many are there? Here's where we draw our charts. Now we work our way around. Where are they located now? Maybe we draw our pitch again and we say, you know, here's where they're located. Okay. Now we unleash time. Now we start to draw our timeline that says they're moving. Time is passing. And as they're moving, what's actually happening? This one's moving over here. This one's moving over here. This one's coming up here, getting the ball, moving it back over here. We're actually mapping out the cause and the effect. Now, that would be enough. For most ideas that we want to explore, if we can draw picture 1, picture 2, picture 3, and picture 4, it's enough. Most ideas will become radically clear, remarkably clear, and problems will begin to become clarified if we are able to go through and draw in sequence the first 4 pictures. Because by the time we reach here, we will know so much about what's going on in our idea or our problem that once we move into the flowchart, what we're really actually doing is solving the problem. We're mapping out how we might move the pieces around or force them to interact in such a way that gives us the result that we want. I hope I'm being clear here. What we want to do when we're working by ourselves or with a small team, we're going to talk more about this in a moment, is start by drawing a portrait, then a chart, then a map, then a timeline. Okay, fine. We've gotten our idea clear. Now we go and we draw our flow chart, which is where we are really, really, really thinking through what's happening. This is really the challenging part because we've got all of our pieces now lined up and we're moving them around and we're seeing what kind of impact they have on each other. Okay, fine. So what about why? What about this multivariable plot? What's this one? The multivariable plot, by definition, is the hardest picture to draw because it is the one that pulls together everything. The who's, the how muches, the where's, the when's, the how's, and it maps them all together onto some kind of usually quite elaborate coordinate system that says the intersection of all of these different dimensions of data leads me to be able to look at the world this way. Now, why is creating a multivariable plot interesting? And the beauty of homework for this week is we have 3 of the participants who are on the call who created beautiful multivariable plots that we're going to look at when we reach the end of today's session to give real examples of this. But the multivariable plot is the part that allows us to actually see the complete interaction of a bunch of different dimensions of data types or ideas that normally don't get looked at together. It forces us to push things together that normally are looked at separately. And then when we do that, we almost invariably see something new. And we'll go to an example of that. I want to pause for a moment because these are the 6 pictures. I see that if anybody's got a comment or a question at this point, would you raise your hand? Let me know. I'd like to turn this on and see what anybody might want to add. I think I've just turned you on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Dan, what's on your mind?
So when I run into problems on this particular stage, what I often find is I don't have a well-formed problem statement.
Okay.
In other words, I haven't taken the time to describe either the current outcome or the anticipated outcome that I'm getting that I don't want. And if I don't do that, then I get confused in all the other steps.
Can you give us some kind of example, even a quick one?
Sure. Let's see. Let's take a quick one. But without trying to get in any controversy. If we take the recent shootings in Sandy Hook, if we define the problem as any of 3 causes, if we define the problem as there's too much mental illness, there are too many guns, or there's not enough security, then you really haven't defined the outcome that you don't want. What you want, the outcome is you want to make sure the children are protected. And there may be multiple causes for why the children are not protected.
Right.
So you have to fully state what the end outcome is, not what some of the potential causes are as the problem.
And is your concern that you have to state that up front?
Well, you have to have a starting point that is as close to the end outcome as you can get. You may modify it as you go through this diagnosis and analysis. But if you focus everything on what turns out to be a symptom rather than a problem, then you can't solve the problem.
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right. Dan, I'm going to take 2 things out of what you've just said that I think I can help visually sort of parse. The first one is the need to create a good problem statement. The idea there being that everything that we face in the world is complicated. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and just add a new page right now. Let's take this one. The first thing we need to do is come up with a good problem statement. We've got a problem. And in your particular example, there was a school that was full of children, which is where kids belong during the day. And there was a man who came in with a gun and killed many of those children. And then, of course, that man was killed himself. And this is an enormously tragic problem. And so here's, Dan, what I would do. I would say that the problem statement is, first off, one problem statement is we simply need to think about this. And here's where I think that using the 6x6 actually can help us formulate the problem statement. Who is involved? Well, we had students. We had a shooter. We had teachers. We had parents. We had the community. Lots of people are involved. What was there? Well, there was a gun. Maybe there was some mental illness. There's a bunch of things. We could identify the factors, and then we could go in and we could count them. We could go and count the number of guns. We could count the number of students. We could do all these things. It's very analytical. We could do that. We could count. And then we could say, well, where are they located? And we could make our maps. I think what would be more interesting would be to create some 2x2s that start to relate various pieces of the data here. Some sort of correlation perhaps of mental illness, gun ownership, access to guns, a whole bunch of things that we could map together and say, well, where do these players sit? And then we could say, well, when do things happen? And we could map out acquisition of guns, development of mental illness. We could take any of these variables, any of these nouns, and look at various ways that they interact. I think that what's happening here is without a problem statement right from the beginning, we have the opportunity to identify all of the pieces that ultimately are going to come to play. I don't know that we need to formulate an effective problem statement at the beginning. I think one of the ways it's useful for me about using the 6x6 is I just start drawing. And by the time I reach here, this is why I think that doing 4 pictures is really interesting, I'm actually formulating my problem statement by about the time I get right here. This is where I'm starting to say, okay, I now begin to understand that what I'm really, really concerned about is the interaction of students, mentally ill individuals, and guns. What is the interaction here? And now I can create a multivariable plot that I could pump all kinds of different data into and start to say, oh, here are the overlaps that I'm seeing, and maybe out of that I can get some kind of intelligent outcome. So to me, I think there's a great idea that you brought up, which is if the problem statement isn't well formulated, I don't know where I'm going to go with my work. So formulating a good problem statement up front is a good idea. I think that there's use in visual thinking, vivid thinking, to say even if I don't have a good problem statement, using the tools, I can take a big, cloudy, obscure, foggy, complicated idea and begin to lay it out with enough clarity that perhaps I can start to formulate a problem statement if I didn't have one. I've often thought about this in the past in the following way. If I know what my problem is, I can put it in a box and I have a really great problem statement. Here is my problem, problem X. For me, what's useful is being able to then say, well, what's the nature of my problem? Well, you know what? It's really a problem of money. I don't have enough money. The first picture I would then draw is I'd go to my How Much and I'd start drawing out charts. Well, how much money do I have or how much money do I need? So if I know the type of problem, if I have my problem statement, I know exactly which picture to start drawing. That's option A, where I have the problem statement. But option B is I don't have the problem statement. What I then find is effective is I don't worry about it. I just say, okay, let's start drawing the problem out and go again around the steps of the cycle. And by the time I get here, I've gone around each of these, by the time I get here, for me, the problem statement has started to become very, very clear. So I hope that that's useful. Dan, I've still got your line open. Does that make any sense?
Yes, as long as you're very careful with the first step, which is to have a broad enough perspective on who or what is the problem. I think what we see too often is people focus in on a subset of who or what is involved.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Philip, I'm going to turn you on as well. I see that you've got some comments. Philip, you should be on now too. Do you want to throw something in on this?
Yeah, I can. I'll try.
Do you want to add a little bit to this?
Well, only that, that this seems to be one of those situations that is in which it's very valuable to define the problem. I've listened to lots of discussions about this particular topic and all the other ones. Living here in D.C., it's a constant argument. And people are arguing past each other because they've never gotten to the point of really defining what the problem is. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. I think actually the problem statement is an important thing to start out with. But if the problem is that we can't get agreement on what the problem is, then I think that's a great objective.
So letting the problem be defining the problem.
Exactly.
I like that very much. So one problem statement. Let's put it this way then. If I don't have a problem statement, this is my problem right here. If it is so difficult for me, it's so laden politically or with so many layers of information that I don't have an effective problem statement, this works very well. Problem one then becomes define the problem.
There you go.
And I think I have not thought this through in the way that you both are describing it, but what I have found is very often defining the problem is the problem, and I use the 6x6 as my toolkit to help me define the problem. And taking into consideration, Dan, what you were suggesting, as I'm drawing picture number one, which is my portrait, I want to make sure that I am including all of the necessary pieces and make sure that I'm not leaving anything out. I think it's important also to emphasize that from my own perspective, what we're trying to do here is be as objective as possible. As we're drawing our pictures, let's put everything that we can in right from the beginning, and then by the time we get around here, we'll see what may have slipped away. I see that Jeff, you have got a comment to add. Jeff, I'm turning you on. Do you want to throw something in?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so I would love, and I actually came into this fall hoping to be able to get just 3 big bullets that I can drill down on with the materials. I've watched all the videos for the cadets. I've got all the books. I've read them. I've been working on this, probably 5 or 10 hours a week for the last 2 or 3 years. And what I get stuck is I get to where you have right here with the 6x6, but to actually take that and turn it into the presentation that you did for healthcare or that you did for accounting, I would love to get three simple bullets on how do you take the mess that comes out of the discovery work and get it into that format that can be communicable.
Got it. Okay. And in fact, that's a perfect segue into one of the questions that was in our survey as well, and it may have even been yours. Someone had said, it appears that there are actually 2 parts to this visual thinking. Part number 1 is really exploration. Here's me, and here's my problem. I think bullet point number 1 for you, Jeff, is this. And let's put a bullet point by it. Use the 6x6 as a way to clarify your own thinking. Okay, so this could be the messy process that we just mapped out, and it will be a messy process. Part number 2 then, I've clarified it. You know what? I've got my 6 pictures. By the time I've used my 6x6, I should have 6 pictures. I really should. A portrait, a chart, a map, a timeline, a flow chart, and a multivariable plot. If I've done my work right, I should have at least, well, realistically, I should have 4 out of those. Then number 2 comes the communication part. So there's now me, and I've got this clear structure in my mind, or I think it's mostly clear. And now I've got to communicate it to a bunch of other people. And Jeff, if I'm hearing you correctly, what I think you're asking is, how might I take this, what I've done on my own, and turn it into something that's palatable and appealing for me to share? Is that correct?
That's exactly it. And the use case for me right now is I just started a new job. I've been in technical and software sales for many years, And the product that I'm working with is very complex. And I'm getting lots of data points from pre-sales engineers, our CIO, my boss, the other sales reps. And so I have lists of who, what, when, where, how divided into pieces. But making it into a presentation, I'm still struggling with that.
Okay, so let's ask you've brought up a number of questions. So let's say you've got all the pieces and you're pretty comfortable with understanding them. And what you want to do is convert it into this presentation. So in some of my earlier work, it's not something we've addressed as we've gone through Vivid Grammar, but it's absolutely critical. Piece number one is I got to know who's this audience. Who are these people? And what is their tolerance for me delivering all of this data and visuals to them? So what is their tolerance for me? What do they want to know? What are they curious about? And how much of what I have to share are they interested in? Are they experts or are they newbies? Are they
Right.
quant people or are they qualitative people? Are they sympathetic or are they antagonistic? There's a whole slew of questions that if you have a chance to look through the end of the book, blah, 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 that we're going to get to a little bit later, there's something I actually call the lens tool, which is it's another mnemonic of that I use to help us try to suss through who our audience is. I'm not going to go into the lens tool right now. It's in the back of blah, blah, blah. And as I say, we'll get to it here several sessions down the line. But the idea is we need to analyze who our audience is. Why? Because we need to determine which of the pictures we've drawn are going to make the most sense to them. So let me ask you this, Jeff. In your particular case, you said you've got a very complex technical solution that you're selling. Can you tell us very briefly what is the nature of it and to whom are you typically trying to present it?
Sure. The nature of it is making communication for web services and APIs simpler and more secure. And the audience that I'm going to be typically presenting to are enterprise architects and CIOs and heads of software development.
Okay, so you've got a technically complicated offering that you're going to be presenting to technical experts who are very familiar with the types of terminology that you're going to be using and the types of problems that you're talking about.
Yeah, in fact, what we're finding is on meeting one today versus 5 years ago, the customers have probably 90% of the information they need to make a decision and are ready to go before our first meeting. And that's a shift that we've seen in the last 2-3 years.
Okay.
So it's less about educating and it's more about, as you said, delivering highly technical information to highly technical decision makers who are already 90% of the way to making up their mind, and you only get one shot at it.
Right. Okay, so in your particular case, I'm going to give you an answer that I believe will work. And you might not like it. I think that what you need to do is focus on the multivariable plot aspect of your product. That is to say, I would be willing to bet that through the work that you've done and the fact that you come from a technical organization working on a technical product for a technical audience, I'll bet you could rattle off really fast all the who's and what's about the pieces. Who are the players? What are the components? I'll bet you could whip out a technical architecture diagram pretty quickly, and I don't mean to demean the work, but I'll bet it's something that you could probably do in your sleep.
Probably.
What my guess is, because you're an expert and your audience are already experts, this audience expects you to come in and sell them something. That's what they're expecting. And they don't want you to sell them something, my guess is, because, they already know a lot and you already know a lot, and they've probably, have they identified a problem? I don't want to presume too much here, but having been in a lot of technical sales, often you feel like you've got a fantastic solution. If they'd just be willing to listen to it, they might see the light at the end of the tunnel why they need it. But they're such experts that they might often be more antagonistic than anything else.
Yep.
So what always disarms this group is to create a multivariable plot. It is the hardest picture to create, but that's okay because you're actually describing a very difficult and very competitive sales situation. So to put the picture in, what might be the multivariable plot? If you could come up with a plot that somehow says, I'm just going to make this up right now. ladies and gentlemen, in terms of security, high security and low security, and maybe high cost and low cost, or whatever your metrics are going to be, you could start to map in here. Here is competitor A, here's competitor B, here's competitor C. Here is where we come in. And you're actually putting together multiple dimensions of data now. Maybe it's in the intersection of cost versus technical complexity versus efficiency versus speed of change. Whatever the variables are that matter to these people, to these experts, you pull all those variables in and you map them together in a way that they've never seen before. And all of a sudden, they're used to thinking about the world in terms of this. And you show them this. And they're going to say, wait a minute, can you do that again? How did that happen? And then you do that. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. And it speaks to the example that you gave in the Thomson Reuters analogy, which was, I still have that emblazoned in my head. It was wonderful.
That's the one. Well, that's exactly the way I bring it up. And in fact, we've got some more multivariable plots that I know some of our callers have put together. I absolutely want to have Frederick, Thomas, and John have a chance to share their multivariable plots. This was the homework from our previous session, and I'd asked people to create an MVP, multivariable plot, either on the future of personal computing, what makes a great novel, or why my company will succeed, or something related. And as I say, 3 people did fantastic work. And Thomas, I'm going to open it up to you first. Thomas, are you with us?
Yes, Don. Yes.
Okay,
yes,
Thomas
I
from
hear you.
Finland. Can you walk us quickly through your chart, and I'll draw and move along as we go to give you a preview. I've put all 3 pictures of yours in here as a build.
Okay, thank you. Yes, really shortly about the background of my company. We are providing energy solutions globally, and these presentations will be then related to the products and the service that we are then providing. And this is such a fictive example, but based then on facts. So you see here my company, where it could be located, related to the product diversity. We have many products compared to a few products in the product portfolio. And then on the x-axis we have research and development, spending a small amount of money versus spending a lot of money on R&D.
Okay. So Thomas, can I summarize then visually what this shows us is if we were to map together product diversity versus amount of research and development spending, your company has a fair number of products and a reasonable amount of research of R&D spending. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Very good. Shall I go on to the next slide?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Okay, so this is then continuing a bit to build on this same, and I've introduced here a timeline, and going from the past when we then had products mainly then using oil, and then going to greener solutions like gas, and then perhaps in the future going to even more greener solutions than as wind energy, wave, solar, and whatever is then at the end of the road.
Okay, so Thomas, if I understand correctly, we're obviously located right about here now. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Good. Okay. Shall I move on?
Yes, please. And this is then let's say that the final part of this build is how we could then get nicely into the future by squeezing, let's say, as much money as possible out of the current technology, oil and gas based solutions, and then spending more perhaps on R&D, and then being able to then invent solutions then for the future and for greener, even greener products.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to summarize back to you then. If we look at the purpose of our multivariable plot, is it true to say that we can become, if I understand correctly the mechanism you're describing, we can diversify our products even more without needing to spend vastly more money on research and development. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a really good summary.
Okay. Well, Thomas, this is very, very good. And here we start to see the beginnings of where we can use a multivariable plot, putting together multiple dimensions of data. And now what I'd like to do is move on to Frederick. And Frederick, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, Frederick, you're going to have to take a moment and walk us through because this is quite elaborate. So tell us what first of all, tell us what the axes are, the vertical and the horizontal, and then let's go from there.
Yeah, perhaps I must to present in 2 minutes and 2 seconds my problems. I'm a young entrepreneur in the field of visual thinking in France, and my problem is I must solve is to communicate this offer in a country which prefers to give priority to the verbal rather than to the visual. So I use a MVP to clarify the benefits that visual thinking could offer to the French companies. And I tried to identify the products and service I could deliver to the customer. And I classify in 2 groups. On the left side, the services to solve the problems. On the right side, the services and the products used to present the solutions.
Okay.
And I divided these 2 parts in 2 other categories, offline services, and on each part of a quadrant is subdivided to present products and services by positioning them according to 2 criteria. So horizontally, the number of persons who can benefit of the product of service, and vertically an indicative, very precise, but an indicative return on investment for every product.
Okay, so to take one for example, if I just look at this quadrant right here, can you just walk us through what that quadrant shows, and then, for example, to compare it to this one, just so we get a good sense in our mind of what we're mapping out here?
For example, there is one person who can benefit to this product. It's a visual analysis of the initial problem of the customer.
Exactly what we were talking about a moment ago.
Yeah, exactly. So it's special part of my job because it's the first step. And okay, I will draw the four pictures, and after this job, we can decide. Okay, it was wonderful, but I want my team will be competitive. So I need to go to next level, a visual training session. So someone can come and tell, I want a PowerPoint presentation, and I can work with this person from a PowerPoint presentation to a visual thinking analysis of his problem.
So, Frederick, what I'm admiring about your work is what you've actually done is you've created a map. This multivariable plot of yours starts out as a map where we have our 2-coordinate system, and into this map you're able to plot in all of the different types of offerings that you might have. And then on top of that map, you can superimpose this flow chart that says, here is exactly how I want to move my client from one offering to the next. So you're actually creating the flow chart where the underlying structure was the map. Well, Frederick, I a lot of sympathy and appreciation for what you've done, because the map that you've created is almost exactly the same as the map that I have needed to create for my own business. So Frederick, I appreciate very much you taking the time to walk through this. This is an impressive amount of work that you've done, and this brings us to John, who I thought had a really remarkable multivariable plot. John, you've got 5 minutes. Can you do it?
I will do it, Dan.
Let's do it. Okay.
I'm going to try and just give you a feel for this without going into the detail. At the top of this was a table of novels I was trying to answer the question, what are the criteria for a great novel? I presupposed the problem, and then I said, okay, the solution is we look at plot, character, writing style, length, and I made the very important assumption that I have to look at sales. You see I've divided into a book, an author, language, published, sales. Let's go to the next graphic.
Go on.
So on the next graphic, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the top line. This is a multivariable plot of the great novels we just saw in the table before by sales.
Mm-hmm.
And the conclusion I came to after working with the horizontal timeline and the vertical y-axis of millions of sales, I identified three major themes. The first one is mystery, the second one is a quest, and the third is the concept of death and resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
And if I just take you to the right-hand side of the x-axis where you see the kite runner, above that you'll see the word she, and this was a novel by H. Rider Haggard, and to the right of that you're going to see the Da Vinci Code. They're both examples of mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at, I'm going to take you to the Tale of Two Cities and The Little Prince. They both sold 200 million copies. I tried to use color to show a correspondence. And both of these two have to deal with the theme of death and resurrection. Mm-hmm. The other third major category, which is outlined in black, were principally quest novels, everything from The Hobbit through to The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe and The Magician. What I found as a personal conclusion that I wasn't aware of is this theme of death and resurrection is all the way through many of these novels. So I'll just conclude at that point.
And for all the rest of you, it's now going to be your turn. We've reached, as you know, the end of our section on vivid grammar. If you want to practice a little bit of vivid grammar, make sure that you're familiar with it and comfortable before we move on. I'd like you to just pick a Fox idea that you like, a written idea normally expressed in words. It could be a quote, a rule, a commandment, or a teaching. And then go ahead and use the tools of vivid grammar, the 6x6, the vivid grammar graph, to go ahead and draw a picture of how your hummingbird sees that same idea. So what we're looking to do is combine the fox idea with the hummingbird idea and come up with a truly vivid expression of that idea. Hey, thank you all for another great lesson. This is Dan signing off from the Napkin Academy, but don't go away. Now on our new platform, you can still submit your homework. Debbie, our community manager, is going to join you right now to show you exactly how to do that, and I really encourage you, do your homework. Okay, take it away, Debbie. See you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this Napkin Academy classic video. We've made it easier than ever to share your homework. After you've completed your homework and have a JPEG or PNG file saved on your computer, come back to this course. Once you're back here, scroll to the bottom of the screen, and in the comments box, you can add a comment. I'm just going to call this one My Homework. You can also add images by clicking on the Insert Edit Image button here. In the source box, click on the file. In the Images window, click on Upload, and then click on Add Files. This is going to take you to your computer where you can search for your images. I'm just going to search for mine in Pictures, and I'm going to choose this image here. You can also add multiple images here. Click Upload. After the upload is complete, click Close. Then scroll down, and you'll see that the last image is here, and it's checked. This is the one we just uploaded. Click Insert. I suggest in the Dimensions box you change the maximum to 1200 pixels and leave the Constrained Proportions box checked. You can also add an image description here if you'd like. Click OK. You'll see that your image has been added to your comment. And now the last step, the most important one, make sure that you click the green comment button here to upload your homework to the Napkin Academy. We hope to see your homework soon.